Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 93 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I've got a terrific guest queued up for today, but before we get to that, a few comments here from me. It's great to be back behind the microphone. It's been a little while, actually. I ended up spending quite a lot of time in December preparing for the launch of my book, which launched on January 5th. And then January didn't go exactly as I planned. I've had a few things going on here at home that I've been trying to manage, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys who are widowed parents that, you know, things don't always go smoothly, and, we're the only ones left to handle it. So anyway, here we are. The book launch was very exciting. I'm viewing this as an extended launch, so I'm still very much have a lot of things planned. I'm going to be telling you guys all about the fabulous people who wrote advanced praise quotes for the book and telling you about their work because they're all doing interesting and important things that I want you guys to know about. And I will probably do some other sharing. I haven't quite decided if I may start doing some read-alouds of some sections. I will see how it goes, but if you're interested in that, shoot me a note and let me know, because I think that might be an interesting thing to do, make some videos on YouTube and things like that. I'm going to start doing some more live streaming. I actually did a live stream a week or so ago after not having done them in a while, and it was a lot of fun, so I'm going to start doing that again. But the book, I want to tell you guys about the book. If you haven't seen it yet, you can go to futurewidowbook.com, and I have there, of course, links to all the different stores where you can buy it, and there's a paperback and an ebook, both. Also a description of the book, some information about it. It's really been terrific to hear from people who have read it already and read some of the reviews on Amazon, which have just been so nice. And it's really great to hear from people what they liked about it. And, of course, I knew that it would be people who are widowed parents like me, or people who have a spouse, who may be terminally ill. That's kind of the most obvious audience. But it's really been great to hear from people that the interest is much broader than that. Hearing from people who have grief, surrounding other people that they've lost in their lives, maybe not a spouse, but somebody else close to them, and how they actually found the reflections and information in the book helpful and interesting for them, as well as the people who maybe are coming at it from the perspective of wanting to understand their friends and understand how to support a friend or a loved one who is maybe grieving or going through an advanced serious illness or something of the sort. So it's really been so great to hear from people who have reached out, and, it's people that I know, it's people that I don't know, it's listeners of the podcast. It's really been wonderful. So check it out, futurewidowbook.com. And that is all for now, and let's get on to today's guest. Today's episode is brought to you by my very own book. It's called Future Widow: Losing My Husband, Saving My Family, Finding My Voice. And it's a memoir, and you can find out all about it at futurewidowbook.com. That's futurewidowbook.com. And there you can find the links to buy it everywhere books are sold. And look for the button that says buy the ebook directly from the author, and you can save 15%. Just use the special code LISTENER15, that's LISTENER15, and go to futurewidowbook.com. I hope you check it out, and I hope you love it. I had such a great discussion with Pamela Addison for this episode. Pamela is a widowed mom of 2 young kids, and her healthcare worker husband died of COVID-19 way back in the early weeks of the pandemic. And I'm so glad she was kind enough to come on the show and share her experience with us, both her experience of losing him and then her journey since then, and particularly about the Facebook group she started. It's a very active group for other younger women and men both who have lost their spouses to COVID-19. And I think it's a terrific way for people who have, this in common of losing spouses right now during this pandemic. Many of them are widowed parents as well. I think they have kids in all different age groups, but younger widowed people who have this common type of loss. She's pulled together this resource for them, and I think it's terrific. So I hope if that applies to you, you'll check it out. And you'll let any of your friends know who may find that resource useful as well. So I hope you enjoy my discussion with Pamela Addison. My guest today is Pamela Addison, who's joining us today from Waldwick, New Jersey. Pamela, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining me today on the show. I read an article that you had written, which was recently posted on Scary Mommy, and it was all about losing your husband to COVID. And you've started a Facebook group, which I want to hear all about. And I realized that I haven't done an episode on the show yet specifically about people who've lost their loved ones to COVID and the challenges and experiences and, maybe some of the support that's available or not, as the case may be, around that. So I'm very glad that you were willing to come on here and talk with me today.
I'm glad to be here.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you to start by reading just the first part of this post. You recently wrote a post called "What a Difference a Year Makes." And just to kind of set the stage for us, I wonder if you could read that first paragraph.
Sure. Life was so different a year ago, and I just wish I could close my eyes and travel back in time to happier times. Martin and I were 3 weeks away from welcoming our second child into this world. We had just enjoyed a wonderful visit from Martin's father, who made his yearly visit to the States from the UK. We were enjoying the last few weeks as a family of 3. We were getting ready to celebrate 5 years of marriage. A year ago, we were filled with happiness, excitement, and most of all, love.
So you wrote this post on October 14th, 2020, so just fairly recently here. So yeah, what a difference a year makes. I mean, the world is different. Your life is different, turned upside down. Tell us first a little bit about your husband and about your family, your kids, and about you.
So my husband was a speech pathologist at St. Joseph's Hospital in Paterson, New Jersey, and he was like one of those amazing speech pathologists. Like since his death, like people have reached out and tell me how amazing he was, and he was also a real mentor to a lot of his colleagues, and he also got students every spring. So he just had like such an impact on all of their lives that, even they say like, St. Joe's is not the same because he's like not there anymore. And so he had quite an impact on a lot of people's lives. And like I always knew the way he talked about work, I always knew he was really good at it. But like once he died, like I really just saw like, wow, I was right, but I had no idea.
Yeah.
Kind of like, when you die and when people die, you like find out more about them, and it's
right.
And I kind of found out that about my husband. So
yeah,
and he was just like a really funny, smart guy, and he was the greatest husband. Like he was just so supportive and loving, and he was quite the romantic. He would always like make little surprises for me just to make me feel special and loved. And those are the things like I really miss, like him just like bringing like a special cookie home for me because I had a rough week, those kind of things. And he was just like a great papa.
Yeah.
He loved his kids so much, and he was.
And you had two very small kids, right?
Yeah. So I have a 2.5-year-old, and my son just turned 1.
Okay. So tell us then. Everything changed in March, April. What happened?
So my daughter turned 2 on March 21st, and the next day, on that Sunday, my husband started to have a cough. And he had known that he might have seen a COVID positive patient, but they had not yet been tested COVID positive, but there was a chance. So, of course, knowing that he might have been exposed, he tried to get tested right away once the cough came. But it was during that time where, like, there were lines for tests, sort of like how it is now, and they were turning people away. But I had read that the place that he was going to go to was already maximum capacity. He couldn't go. And then he tried to find another place to get tested, and it took until Thursday for him to finally get tested. And I mean, at first it was just a cough. I wasn't too concerned, but that Wednesday when he started to have a fever, that's when like the fear started.
Yeah.
And then I just feel like it got progressively worse until the morning of April 3rd, when I literally heard him gasping for air. And I ran to the door and tried to ask him, can you breathe? And he wouldn't respond. And every day before that, when I asked him, can you breathe? Because at the beginning, that was the telltale sign that you need to go to the hospital right now.
Yeah.
And he would always tell me, say yes. So that was the first morning he couldn't even answer me. So I knew something was wrong, and I had to call 911. And 911 came. The paramedics were like, ma'am, you were right. They wheeled him out of my house, and that was the last time I saw him in person.
Wow. And that was April, what was that?
3rd.
April 3rd. Okay. And so then what happened next?
So I waited for the hospital to call me that day, and they just said that he had that really bad pneumonia that's associated with COVID. They didn't intubate him yet. They had him on oxygen. His levels seemed to be good. I was getting positive reports like, oh, he's eating. Oh, he can eat and breathe. That's a really good sign. And then on Sunday, I think a nurse called me and asked me to bring his phone. So we were texting, and then for a couple of days. And then on Tuesday, he wasn't texting me, but I wasn't really too concerned because I'm like, oh, he's probably resting. He's been having a rough time. Because one of the last texts was like, I had a really rough time last night or something. And then I got a call from a doctor that said they had to intubate him, and it wasn't looking very good. Because his body was attacking itself. And he hadn't seen that before in a patient. Because I remember asking, well, have you seen this before? Do people that their bodies are attacking their own body, do they recover? And he's like, I haven't seen this before. This is a whole new thing for me.
Wow. And this was early in the pandemic too.
Yes. That's what gnaws at me too, is he got it so early when a lot was unknown still. So, I mean, after that, I signed the papers for him to get the experimental drug virtually. So he started to get those, and it seemed like he was improving, and they were about to take him off to try to extubate him, but then he got a bacterial infection, and he went all the way backwards to where he was when they first had to intubate him. And after that, it's just was one of those things, I think he was just too weak by that bacterial infection to get better. But they were still trying to, he improved, but then they wanted to try. He was too weak to breathe on his own. So then they gave him a tracheotomy to help wean him off. And that was on April 27th. And that was the night I was able to call him after his surgery. And a nurse that knew someone from my daughter's daycare went into the room while I was on the phone and held his hand for me. So he kind of felt although I was talking to him, someone was holding his hand for me. And he squeezed her hand when I said, I loved you. And that ended up being our last FaceTime conversation. And then 2 days later, he passed away. And the last call I had with the doctors 2 hours before he died was, tomorrow's going to be a better day. And then 2 hours later, I got the call that he went into cardiac arrest. Wow,
that's terrible. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think it was maybe in some of your writing, you said one of the hardest parts about losing someone to COVID-19 is the fact that you can't be with them.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
That was really hard. I mean, so every morning when I woke up, I was at like 8 o'clock, I was started to like do the phone calls to find out how his night was, how he was doing. And that was just like a roller coaster ride, because sometimes, you know, you would get someone to tell you how he was doing, or like other times, oh, they're in the room, we'll call you back. You don't get to call back. You wait a little bit, then you have to like go through that cycle over and over. And all I wanted to do was like be there, because I knew like if I were there, he would feel, you know, like comforted and, you know, have that. I mean, he did fight, but like maybe just fight like a little harder. And he, you know, like we were never apart that long since we've known each other. So it was like horrible.
Yeah.
And it's like I felt helpless. Like I couldn't do anything. All I could do was call and like get some FaceTime calls with him. But, you know, a lot of the times when I was FaceTiming him, he was sedated. So he didn't, I mean, he knew I was there because he could hear my voice, but it's just not the same.
Yeah. You weren't
like
really
not
having
be
a
able to hold his
conversation.
hand and like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the extra problems in all of this that just compounds the challenges and the grief and the, what's the word I'm looking for? Difficulty of the whole situation.
Yeah. And that's what I felt like. I was exhausted from like every day, not knowing, waiting for a phone call. And then you live by the phone because you can't be at the hospital. So like every time the hospital called me, like my heart sank. And sometimes it was for nothing. They would just needed information, or it was one of the social workers checking in on me, but you know, it's the same number. So once I saw that number, it's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong?
Yeah.
And then I did have some of those phone calls where, you know, when he was intubated, when they couldn't excavate him because he's had a bacterial infection. Those were like the phone calls I would get with the bad news. And then finally the last call. But it was just like one of those most draining, it was the most draining 26 days of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. So, were you able to have any sort of funeral or activities, you know, marking his life, or was that all shut down at that time?
It was pretty much it was shut down. And so I just decided that at some point when all this craziness is over, I would like to celebrate his life with everyone who life he touched.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people. Like he has friends, he has, you know, our church, he has his colleagues, his students. I just like couldn't like imagine just having like me, my mom, my sister, my brother-in-law, and his mom to like have it. So I'm waiting. And then of course now it's back to all these lockdowns. So I feel like we'll be waiting a little bit longer, but hopefully soon I'll be able to have something to celebrate him. Although like in October, one of the charities he did volunteer his time with had a memorial service, so I was able to speak about him there. So that kind of felt like somewhat of a memorial for him. But
yeah, maybe a first step or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hopefully soon I can have something.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Speaking of October, I think, was that when you celebrated your first wedding anniversary without him?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was a hard day. I'm not gonna lie. It's because you just think about how happy you are in your wedding day, and then how, you know, I was supposed to have more than just 5.5 years with him. Like he should be here celebrating 6 years, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. For
and
sure.
then of course, like my husband, like I said, he was the romantic. So every year he would always think of like a special gift to give me that with the material of that year. And he was just so clever about it. So, so then, of course, because I was a curious person, I was like, oh, let me see what 6 years would have been. And it was like iron, because it's like the strength of your marriage and bond. And I was like, well, that's kind of fitting, because we did have a strong bond. And even though he's not here, our bond is still strong. And, you know, when we were apart those 26 days, we were still, you know, like he heard my voice, he would react. So our bond was strong. but I just like would wonder, oh, I wonder what clever gift he would have got me. And then, of course, because he started doing it, I was like, oh, I should follow suit and do it. And I think the only year I messed up was the year it was linen, because I was like, I don't know what to get you that's linen, like, seriously. But then I was like looking online, like on Etsy, oh, what clever thing would I have gotten him, you know? So it's just like, it was, you know, it was emotional, but, you know, I did remember the good times, and my sister came over, and, you know, that was nice that I got to see my sister, and, you know, she was very supportive that day. So it was kind of like they kept my mind off of it, which was, you know, it was like good to have a happy day in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, at some point you decided to start a Facebook group. Can you tell us, so why did you start a Facebook group, and what is the group about?
So, when I was going through all this, I really felt alone. Like, I was looking at everyone else I knew, and I'm like, why are, like, all my friends, this is not happening to them. Like, I'm the only one. No one's going to understand what I'm going through. No one's going to understand what I've been through. And then one day I got a card in the mail from another widow who lost her young husband to COVID, who also had kids around my age. And that was like the first time I realized, wow, I'm not alone. And that was like such a powerful moment, because I felt like a sense of relief, because at least there's someone who's going to understand what I went through.
Yeah.
So then I was part of different COVID groups, and I decided I had written an opinion piece for the NewJersey.com, and I posted it. And then on these groups, a lot of younger women started to comment like, oh, this was my story. It's exactly the same. I remember those phone calls. I remember this. I have young kids. I have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old. And it's just like all of a sudden I was like, oh my goodness, they thought they were alone too. And once they read my writing, they realized they weren't. So one day I'm just like driving, where I think when I drive, I get my best ideas. And I'm like, you know what? I need to start a Facebook group to help us talk about all this, because you know what? They were like me. They thought they were alone. They thought this was happening just to them. And so I created a group, and it's my hope that we can help each other get through this pain and heartache, because COVID is very different, because like you said, we have that extra trauma from all that time when we were apart from our spouses, all those phone calls, those not knowing what's going to happen. So I just thought that we could help each other by, you know, talking about our experiences and be there for each other, because only we know what we went through.
Yeah, I think that's terrific. I mean, it's COVID and people losing people to COVID and losing spouses and parenting young children because of COVID losses. It's also new, right? I mean, it's all in the last 6, 7, 8 months that it's a brand new thing. And I don't know how many resources there are yet specifically for people who've lost someone to COVID. But it's great, I think, that you've got this group going and that people can find each other. Yeah. Through that.
And I feel like even in the end, if we're able to meet one day, we all have young kids. So I feel like it's important for my kids to have kids that understand, you know, their loss as well, because they're like this new generation of parent, you know, of losing a parent very young because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I think that will be nice for them too. Like if we can all meet one day.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you know, this is reminding me, I think that there's a certain, you know, community of like people who like 9/11 widows, right? It's a unique experience within the overall widowed experience.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. I hope you guys can meet someday. That'd be terrific. What do you think are some of the, I don't know, the challenges that you think that people, you know, you're seeing from people you talk to in your group or whatever, just like broadly speaking, you know, common things that come up for younger widows with kids who have COVID losses?
I feel like the overall is that you want them back, because, you know, you had those dreams of like all of these because it's mostly men. like that we've lost. They all wanted to be those dads, and now they're not there to be the dad that they dreamed of being. Just like my husband. And I feel like that's like so painful. And then you see your kids knowing that they're not going to have their dad bringing them places, doing the things. You know, some of these women are like, he dreamed of taking her to, you know, a daddy-daughter dance. Now he's not going to ever be able to do that. You know, it's like those little things that, you know, you saw like your future, and now it's like a completely different future because he's not there. And it's like, how is my daughter going to be okay with that, like adjust to that? So I feel like a lot of it is like that sense of, you know, your dreams are now no longer dreams that you thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
And like, so, a lot of it is like, how am I going to raise my kids on my own?
Right.
Like, he did this, he did that. It's like all those like unknowns.
Right. And now all of a sudden the person is a single parent with kids of whatever age they are. Are the people in your group mostly pretty much have kids, teenagers? Like, what's the kind of population demographics?
I feel like it's evenly split, because like there's some that have like, you know, the teenagers and like 10-year-old ages, and then there's some of us that have the real young ones that are like, you know, 18 months, a year. The woman who wrote me the card, I mean, her son's like 2 months older than my son, so that they're like in the same age range. And then there's some that do have the kids in their 20s.
And it's for it's not just for moms, right? I mean, it could be for moms or dads who've lost their spouse.
Oh yes, it's for It just right now it's mostly women, but I'm hoping, you know, men will also join. Like, I've been trying to reach out, trying to get it out there as much as possible, because I do remember that loneliness, and I just want a lot of us just want to help each other, because we know that we can help each other get through this.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I hear from listeners who are widowed dads quite a lot that there aren't nearly as many resources for widowed dads out there as there are for widowed moms. And I'm speaking generally, not just COVID related, but, you know, in general. So yeah, good. So I hope that widowed dads for whom your group is relevant will find you and join up with that. One more thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know you said that your husband was a speech pathologist and worked at a hospital, which puts him in the healthcare worker category. And I know that there's I guess it's a grant program called the Brave of Heart Fund, which I actually talked to New York Life about, because they're one of the big sponsors of it, back in what episode was it? 72, when they were just launching it, about that grant program. And I think when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that you actually were able to take advantage of that program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So there's 2 rounds, like the one that the initial round that like helps you with like the immediate expenses, like funeral or, you know, so that was like relatively easy to do. And it just was like, when I found out about it, it was like such a relief, because, you know, financial hardships are definitely like a worry for me, because, you know, I unexpectedly lost my spouse, and, you know, I have half the income that I used to. So it, to know that there was something out there for, you know, widows of healthcare workers, that was like a great like resource. So I, you know, the application's pretty easy, and then once you get the first round, because I did it relatively early, I had to wait until they opened up like the second round, which is more of like the long-term expenses for the next 6 months, like your mortgage or your rent and your child care and all of that. So you just have to find all the receipts and, you know, upload them and just say what you kind of need. And then they're really good. Like, once I put in my application, they called me if they were confused about something or if I needed to provide more documentation. And then they were like, just like upload the documents. And then within 2 days, I got an email saying that I was going to receive a certain amount. And then 3 days later, I think I got the check. So
wow, that's terrific.
Yeah.
And again, you were not. This is not because you were like a New York Life policy holder or something. This is because your husband was a healthcare worker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the site they list all the jobs the person could have in order for you to qualify to apply for it.
Okay. Good. So I hope that people who are listening who had a spouse who died in this pandemic who was a healthcare worker will check that out. And it's braveofheartfund.com. And people who are listening who, maybe that isn't relevant for themselves, maybe they know somebody that can help get the word out, because I think that's really a good resource that people should know about. Because like you said, I mean, all of a sudden losing half your income, or maybe in other cases, in other families, it might be all their income, is a huge hit. Yeah. So, yeah. I'm glad you were able to, first of all, find out about the program. And secondly, to apply, and it all worked out. And that's really great news.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, gosh, it seems like there's so much to talk about, but I'll just ask you one wrap-up question here, if you don't mind. I always like to ask people at the end some kind of reflection. And so if you could say one thing to people who have lost their spouses to COVID, what would you say to them?
As hard as it is, I know we're never going to fully heal from this traumatic experience, but I truly believe that it does get better, and it's going to take time. But where I was like almost 7 months ago to where I am now, I'm in such a better place. So even though it seems like your life has been thrown a curveball, I do truly believe that things will get better, and we will heal as much as we can, but we're just going to move forward, and that's all we can do.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Pamela Addison, who started a Facebook group for young COVID widows after losing her husband to COVID-19 earlier this year. So Pamela, where can listeners find your blog and find your Facebook group?
So my Facebook group is called Young Widows and Widowers of COVID-19. So if you type it in the search, it should come up. Okay,
I'll put a link in the show notes to that as well.
Awesome. And then my blog is thegracefulswan.blogspot.com.
Okay, terrific. Well, I will put a link in the show notes to both the blog and the Facebook group, so it'll be very easy for people to find you, and I'd encourage them, if they have lost a spouse to COVID and have kids or teenagers, that they check out your Facebook group. And that would be terrific, because I think I'd really like to help spread the word. So also, if you're listening and can tell other people about it, then please do that too. So Pamela, thank you very much for speaking with me today.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Pamela Addison as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 93. And I encourage you to check out Pamela's Facebook group. I'll put a link in the show notes if it's relevant for you, or if you know somebody who might be interested in joining that group, please pass it along to them. And I also wanted to make sure you guys know about some of the resources on my website. And in particular, I'm thinking about the listing I've just added recently. It's called Grief Support Programs and Resources. And so if you go to jennylisk.com, and in the menu under Resources, the very first choice is Grief Support Programs and Resources. I started interviewing programs back last November, and so what I've put on this page, I've organized it by location, a number of short interviews, discussions with people about their programs and what kind of programs they offer during normal times and what they're doing now during the pandemic and what age groups they cover, kids and teenagers and adults. And like I said, I've broken it up by location. And of course, there's many, many more that I haven't been able to interview yet. So there's also a link on the page near the top that says if you can't find something here near you, the National Alliance for Grieving Children has a very comprehensive list in all 50 states in the U.S., as well as a few in some other places. Has a great list of places that you could look into as well. So I'd encourage you to check that out and pass it along to anybody who might find it helpful. Okay, and one more thing before we go. Don't forget, check out my brand new book at futurewidowbook.com. And if listeners would like to buy the ebook directly from me, at that link, futurewidowbook.com, you can find all the stores where it's for sale. And if you find the button that says buy directly from the author, you can use the special code listener15 and get a 15% discount. Okay, all for this week. As always, thank you for listening, and until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.